The cloud. Okay, we're recording and we are ready to go. Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad that you're here. Welcome to this eighth Paparelli Zoom chat for entrepreneurs, and thanks for coming to share and to serve each other. Today is day 58 of the United States of America being shut down. We got 33 million people unemployed. The economy continues its now controversial and sputtering restart. I still look out here on Paces Ferry. I don't see anybody at 8:30 in the morning. There was 2 cars out there. Zuckerberg said Facebook will not open its offices until January of 21. And Elon Musk, love Elon Musk, is telling California it's his business and it's time to make money. He is an essential business. And he won. This Paparelli Zoom chat is an interactive forum for entrepreneurs to discuss their issues and opportunities and share their views and decisions. You know, this is why we get together. Being a leader could be a lonely profession. I really encourage y'all to use this forum for its intended purpose, which is to listen, to learn, but just as importantly for you to share. We're here to help each other. I do believe together we are stronger. I've added a resource page, as I told you, to paparelli.com. So anybody mentions anything today on something that they believe will be helpful to people, it'll get posted on the resource page on paparelli.com. I've listed the house rules in the Zoom chat there, where you're also welcome to put in any questions that you might have. And I forgot, who do I have doing that? Is Kevin Sandlin around? Is he on this call? No, John Marshall. Maybe you can handle that for me. That'll be good. Just keep an eye on that for me.
On the Q&A on the chat?
On the chat, yeah. If something
yeah, of course. Thank you.
That last one, that was helpful. You know, today we're talking about cash, your cash. I entitled this one, It's Gone, You're Gone. The thought of the day, and it's right from Jesus. It says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Translation, focus on your cash and you'll always have cash. I gave a presentation 15 years ago at the ATDC to new entrepreneurs, and I entitled it Cash is Oxygen. The message was simple. You run out of oxygen and you die. You run out of cash, same thing happens. And there were probably 20 entrepreneurs in the room at the time. And for years, I would have people tell me how much of an impact that presentation had on them. The interesting thing was I was never asked to give that presentation again. And I came to the conclusion, you know, the discussion around cash is just not interesting to most entrepreneurs. And, but as an entrepreneur and an investor, I've certainly learned this, that cash goes out really fast and it comes in really slow. So here we are in these terms of uncertainty, and consumers, you know, each of us, and also businesses, we're kind of watching our cash closely. We're hoarding it. We know instinctively, I think, that cash is oxygen. And this is, I think, that's why this is a good subject for us, I think, today. And I believe the people that are on this call are going to be in one or two places. You're either in grow your business value mode, or you're in stay in business mode. If you're growing, you're trying to figure out, what do I spend my cash to get a good return? And if you're in stay in business, you're trying to figure out, how do I keep close watch on my cash so it doesn't go out? So the question I'm going to ask today, and you'll hear this a couple of times, is how are you managing your cash? I asked a couple of friends to share their stories. They're a couple of older guys. These aren't the younger entrepreneurs, they're the older entrepreneurs. And I got one in there that's probably in his 40s, a third that'll come up later. But one is there's two. One is the entrepreneur and the other is the CFO. And I'm going to let the entrepreneur go first, okay? And it's Richard Brock. In 1976, for those of you who don't know, Richard pulled me out of a CPA firm after I was working there for about 8 months and launched me into my new career into the software industry. He was the first entrepreneur I ever met, and I still think he is the absolute real deal. I always compare people to him and his characteristics, and he changed the course of my life. And that is one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur. That's what they do. They change your life. But Richard is, for those of you who don't know Richard, because he was big here in Atlanta, now he's in Arizona, but he's a serial software entrepreneur. He was Entrepreneur of the Year. He had multiple exits. He started a company which went public. He continues to focus on marketing automation, where at one time, he was one of the 10 most influential people in CRM. In fact, most people don't know this, but he coined the phrase Salesforce automation. His current company is Sales Talk Technologies. He offers an incredible AI solution which dramatically increases salespeople's call effectiveness. This is what I love about Richard. He is never down. He is never out. He's always optimistic, and he's actually sometimes practical. So Richard, if you'd unmute yourself, I want to thank you in advance for sharing with us. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right, perfect. I wanted to give you a big intro because you're my best friend, and you deserve this. A lot of people don't know all those things about you.
Well, thank you, Charlie.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for those kind words. They're very kind. Maybe I'll share one thing about being an entrepreneur that I learned in high school from a Latin teacher, of all odd things, okay? What he said was, quitters never win and winners never quit. So that maybe is a key entrepreneurial thing is don't give up. It ain't over till it's over. But basically, you had asked me to share some observations of some mistakes I've made and what I might have learned from them. And so I can maybe start with a mistake I made recently, what I learned from it, into an opportunity.
Well, yeah, I'll just frame it up a little bit. I was interested in, you to tell us a story about where you had sort of limited cash, but you're willing to bet in anticipation of something that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the story you're going to tell us a little bit about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, we were ahead of the market with the sales acceleration applied to sales engagement. Fortunately, the number one person in that space now has redefined that sales AI for sales relevance is more important than cadence. God bless him. But until then, everybody's focused on sales acceleration or just basically cadence. So we were ahead of the time. So I had a chance. I came in the top 10 in a state of Arizona, 250 companies plus applied for a $250,000 grant for innovation development. And getting in top 10, I knew I'd get it the next. Yeah, I knew I'd get in no strings attached. It's just to grow business and employ people. So then the next year, I thought for sure I'd get there. Well, I retained some resources, some development resources, some other people on the team, with the idea being if I get the grant, I'll need these people. And of course, having those people would help me get the grant. But if you don't get the grant, the money's gone. So by spending the money in anticipation of getting the grant, which wasn't sure, I got in the top 10 out of over 250. You'd think I'd get there, but thinking doesn't matter because the cash went out. In retrospect, what I learned was that the product was way ahead of what it was needed to be a competitive product. And so what I should have done is cut the development. But the pain was when because I didn't get the grant, I'd spent the $50,000 extra on development expenses I didn't need. That had to come out of marketing budgets, and that is a problem. Because it's a big problem because you have to get exposure, and early adopters are hard to find, so innovation's hard to pioneer. So that was a huge mistake to bet the ranch on that particular one. So basically, what I learned from that is you got to focus your resources on where you have the highest leverage potential to get a return. Not that you don't have.
Let me ask you this, Richard. When we were together, at MCS, this is way back in the late 70s, early 80s. You kind of bet the farm there. You had everything. You were all in. It was your first deal. And, I kind of watched you in that thing. Why did that work? When you bet it all there, back in the early 80s, on like the IBM PC, remember we were kind of put it all in there. And why did that work? And this last deal that you just talked about not work?
Well, the last deal is working now. It's taken off really fast.
What was the difference? The
difference between the two is, I'm a CPA. And so long story, I developed some software for time and billing. And IBM said, why don't you sell that software to another CPA? And I, well, software's all profit, isn't it? So off I went. Now, the difference was when I went to CPA firms to sell the software, you know, you would be in Atlanta and I'd be traveling all the time. I walked in as a CPA. And the difference in my software, because I knew what the CPAs were trying to do, it was unique because it was telling CPAs you could get your clients to pay you more if you basically showed them increase the perceived value of your services. And that was the unique thing about our product because it gave much more detail than anything else. Now, when I went to a CPA firm, well, it was easy. I go in there with the credibility of being a CPA with a high perceived need to increase their billings and the customer retention. That was easy. So I had credibility in there. All right. And the product was obvious when you looked at it. Well, that is obvious out there. And then we also did a deal where we had a no risk guarantee.
Yeah, but I think that the difference here is you're between these two bets that we're talking about, just to kind of put it, is one, you were betting on getting a grant.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that it was actually in other people's hands, whether or not you're going to get that money or not. It's their decision. Whereas the second where you bet the farm when we were together, you were betting on you.
That's
right. It was you talking to a customer. And I think that that's a big, big difference in what actually happened here. Is sort of like there's a lot of entrepreneurs these days who are betting on on investors coming in and sort of saving the day.
That's a bad bet.
In perspective.
Yeah, that's a huge observation, Charlie. You're right. So if you stick to your knitting, so to speak, there were 40,000 CPA firms. We sold 10,000 of them. So we had 25% market share, which was pretty huge.
Yeah.
We doubled every year.
So what would your advice be to kind of to end this? I want to get to Ralph here, but what would your advice be to entrepreneurs in these times of uncertainty with regard to their cash?
Spend it where you have obvious differentiation, such as you know the space well. Sell to the perceived need, and quit trying to innovate today. I mean, we innovate, and it's incredible what we're doing. But the most important thing is you got to get out in front of them. You got to sell to perceived need. You can't create a need. So do enough work out there in the field, walk around with the people, and whatever the perceived need is, like sell aspirin on New Year's Day. And if you're ahead of the curve, you're trying to sell aspirin on New Year's Eve.
That is a Richard Brock, okay.
Yeah, it does. Everybody, New Year's Eve, I don't need any aspirin. Don't need any aspirin. New Year's Day, it's easy to sell aspirin.
But it's interesting that I like what you're saying there is about, and you're a product guy. I always told you you're a product guy. Richard's amazing. He thinks about product. Is to say it's not about innovation. It's about selling to the perceived need, okay? It's not that one new feature. It's what do they need right now that they'll pay me for.
That's it.
This has been really helpful. Thanks. Hey, Ralph, you around there? Ralph is a longtime friend. He's a former CFO. Ralph was an angel investor. He's now moved from angel investing. He's gotten a little older. He's now a real estate tycoon in the exact right space. He was front page Wall Street Journal. That's where everybody wants to put their money, where Ralph has had his money for the last 5 years. And he's one of the most informed and sophisticated investors I know. Ralph, you there?
I am.
Yeah, you and I were talking about way
I'm
back.
flushing, but I'm here.
Yeah, you were talking about when in the late 80s you were working for tell us about this story about how you got sort of involved with Bypass Systems and who they were.
Well, in 1984, I was hired as CFO of a new company called Bypass System, Inc. And it was in the credit card processing business, or wanted to be in the credit card processing business, and was aimed strictly at the fleet market, where you would have a card for fleets, or in the debit card market. So in my interview process, I was informed that they just raised $5 million. So all I needed to do was come in and put some controls in, figure out how to bill, figure out what costs were, and those types of things. Upon arriving, a sweet young lady who was our accounts payable clerk says, I understand you're the new CFO. I've got a bunch of bills to pay. Here they are. You need to call the bank. And I says, I don't know what you're talking about. Call the bank. Just pay the damn things. And she says, well, the process is that we have to go to the executive VP. We had at this time 27 VPs in the organization, I think, out of 78 people. And so I went to the executive VP and I says, Sandy tells me that we need to get approval from the bank to pay these things? So we just raised $5 million. Why do we go to the bank? And he says, well, let me tell you, it's all gone. 30 days after they raised $5 million, it was all gone. But don't worry about it. We're going to raise venture capital. So I'm sitting there with 110 small investors with a Reg A offering, offering circular, which no one could ever show me any support for anything, much less any financials, and an audited financial statement from a big firm, but no one knew where any of the documents were, and we had no money.
Were you working with John Fester then?
John came in later.
Oh, he came in later. Okay.
Came in
So
later.
then what did you do? So you had their,
So, well, you mean after I got up off the floor and had a drink? Basically, what you have to do in that situation, I just come from another company that had gone from 278 employees to 40. So I was fairly familiar with what needed to be done in that place. But it's, you know, and I want to kind of take a sidestep here and say, this has nothing to do perhaps with anyone's individual business, and everyone here has a different business. They're in a different phase. And so the things that need to be done are much different. And I agree actually a tremendous amount with what Richard said, because he said he had two businesses in two different phases and he had two different problems to encounter. So anything that I say should be taken with a grain of salt, depending on exactly where you are. Are you a stabilized business but small? Are you a growing business with no product, but just a dream? Do you have customers or do you not have customers?
yeah, we'll get that, but tell us your experience, Ralph.
Well, I just wanted to do that. So, you know, basically, interesting enough, when the company had been financed by the bank prior to the offering, they had this stupid looking little yellow sheet that had to be attached to every invoice. And that was what the bank required to fund the debt at that time. And so we just implemented a very simple procedure. We said, if anybody spends anything that's not supported by a yellow sheet signed by Ralph, they're fired. So it was a very tactical approach to a lack of cash. And fortunately, at that time, the founder of the company did have some assets that the bank was willing to take as security. But basically, you know, you do that first, and then you say, okay, who goes? And I would say that in the context of where we are today, different than 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about who has PPP money, and has the PPP money come in? Well, the PPP money is going to be spent very quickly, so you've got to really control what you're spending that money on. And I'm talking about regardless of what the requirements are for that to be forgiven to you. You've got that asset, you have to really husband that money and decide whether or not you're going to pay taxes on it or penalties on it later, and determine whether or not you really do continue to spend on the employees you have, or do you consolidate your business down to a lean machine? And we always said,
So what happened at Bypass as
well,
far as the consolidation?
well, let me finish. So the most important thing to husband your cash is to have the control by the president. Tell everybody they're going to be fired if they spend any money they don't have. And then have a weekly cash flow forecast so you know exactly how much cash you have, what's coming in, et cetera. And then put that in charge of whatever your customer cash receipts are, and how firm are those cash receipts. And I don't mean these fictitious sales forecasts where I got a 50% chance to sign a customer in 3 months, et cetera. I mean what's actually coming in the door through either billed collection of receivables or not. And I think you have to get very, very tactical about what you're spending. And you have to get to Rich's point, or to expand on Rich's point. If you have customers or you are getting ready to acquire customers, is you consolidate down to the minimum number of people that are required to support your top 20 customers, to support the top 5 customer acquisitions that you have. You spend absolutely no money at all on future development of products. You spend no money at all on any type of nuance you're adding to a program. You spend all your money exactly on what product you have today and making sure people are purchasing that product.
Okay. So,
And I would say that the mentality is, if you've got big competitors, is because we had big competitors like IBM and Visa and American Express, big banks, was the mentality that, okay, there's 2 of us, there's only 10 of them, so we got the advantage. So you got to be persistent, dedicated, and just dominate by knowing that if you have large competitors, consistent, well-oiled team can beat them every time.
cool. Speed. Okay. So what I've got here, and Ralph, this is good, and I appreciate you sharing here. So I'm saying that you're saying one, there's 5 things that came up with. One is you get fired if you spend if you spend anything without authorization, right, from a single source, which was you at the time.
Right.
2 is you put together a cash flow forecast weekly, and it only includes what you absolutely know
Right.
you're going to spend and what you're going to receive.
Right.
3rd is consolidate down to the minimum number of people in the organization to serve the top customers. And then 4, I said, focus on the product people are now buying, okay, which eliminates innovation like the next new product, which is going to change the world. And then lastly is be lean and fast, because you could beat any of the big competitors there. That's really good. I like that. Any comments from anybody else on that? Those in any one of those areas? What do I got?
I'll go. It's Yvonne.
Hey, Yvonne.
Hey, so Ralph, thanks a lot. I have an RFP that's out, which would require me to bring in a new product. And just listening to you, I don't need to spend that money to get ahead of the curve to do something else with an RFP I may not win. So I want to thank you for that advice. I wrote it down and I'm going to think about it some more. You know, not spending what that's not guaranteed. So thank you.
Hey, Ralph, whatever happened, what's the other side of this? You know, so you had all these really tight controls.
Mhm.
Okay. There is a happy ending to this thing, right?
Oh, definitely.
So what happened on the other side of this? You know, so that you take me to the beginning, take me to the end.
10 years later, we were the largest company in that market segment, and we sold the business for multiple millions, shall I say.
Okay.
9 figures.
And so what happened? But tell me about the yellow sheets.
Oh, well, 10 years later, before we sold the business, we of course had expanded to about 500 employees. And we had brought in a lot of other entrepreneurs from other companies. And they said, what are these stupid yellow sheets for? I have a budget, I can spend a budget. And we said, no, you can't spend a budget. You have to go through us to get a budget approved. And then before you spend it, you got to come through. And once again, if you don't have that approval, you know, you will be fired. And we fired 3 vice presidents, even though the company was, you know, north of 40 million in sales and extremely profitable.
Isn't that interesting, though, that what you did is you made those yellow sheets at absolute 10 years a part of the culture. And so what became part of the culture is watching cash.
Exactly.
And it served you well all the way up to the exit, which, like you said, was multiple millions of dollars. Everybody did really well. That was pretty cool. And you went from 78 employees, you told me, down to how many?
13.
13 employees. And what did you learn from that?
What I learned from that was that, first of all, you concentrate, as Yvonne was talking about, on the products that you have.
Yeah.
We had no customers at that time. And so we concentrated on 4 or 5 major customers. We consolidated the product offerings down to credit card only, which had not been part of the original thought of the business. We concentrate on the petroleum industry and the C-store industry. And what we learned is that most of the people who earned the highest salaries were the ones that we were expendable. So the executives were expendable. The people who did actual programming or actual accounts payable were the ones that had to be kept. In fact, the last person that was on the cutting edge about being terminated or kept, he was kept only because he was the only one in the company that knew how to run Excel or the predecessor of Excel, so we could do financial planning. So I said, I can do the financial planning. I can't put it on the computer.
Well, Ralph,
He saved his job because of that.
well, Ralph, this is excellent. So I love what you're saying is that the guys that were most expendable, the people that were most expendable were the people with the highest salary. So the executive ranks, not the absolute doers. Okay.
Right.
You know, with that in mind, so thank you, Ralph, for sharing today. And with that in mind, I'd like to talk to Matt Stevens, talk about highly paid executives and see what he's always been pretty good with cash, you know? So I was wondering what, you know, what do you, how are you managing your cash these days, Matt? Tell us just a little, give me a real quick one on your business and so everybody knows where you're coming from.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So we innovate technology to save lives. We're a wearable panic device intended to use against school shootings as a problem. So, you know, listen, when we started to hear word that schools were going to close, obviously, you know, that's a big kick in the gut, right? And we grew about 500% last year in total bookings, TCV bookings over 2018. So the really great news for us as a business was we were on a bit of a rocket ship trajectory, and we had almost a 300 school backlog to install. So that represented, you know, somewhere between $9 and $10 million of accounts receivable, sort of latent AR. Ralph, you said something really interesting, which was, you know, this hypothetical 60 to 90 day, 50% pipeline. I mean, that's the stuff we live on, right? Like, you know, when you said hypothetical, I'm thinking, man, we're projecting deals out in December right now at sort of our sales cycle. So it's, you know, we just recognize that we had to get really scrappy really fast. And, you know, we did the things that you said, Ralph, which was any discretionary spend we cut immediately. You know, anything pointed at marketing, anything pointed at, and it was just, you know, we did it out of a sense of uncertainty. And John Ritchie gave me a piece of advice. He said, don't predict, position. So if this, then that. So we cut all of our discretionary spend, which pulled about $500,000 out of our budget immediately annually. We took a really hard look. There was 3 team members. We're just under a 50-person company. There are 3 team members that we had already been looking at and saying, listen, they're not tugging the rope as hard as the rest of the team. We're a really, you know, we're a scrappy team. And, you know, we put all 3 of them on a PIP and managed them out the door within 30 days because they didn't turn around their behavior the way we wanted to see them. You know, and frankly, they were, Ralph, to your point, they were not the top paid executives, but they were, you know, they were disproportionately
Tell
high.
me this too, Matt. This is good information, but tell me this other piece that I know a little bit about you. You were basically teed up with a Class A venture capitalist, right?
Yeah.
Tell us, just give me a real quick one on that. Share with people so that the entrepreneurs, you know.
Yeah.
What I hear a lot, and we've always heard this, is that entrepreneurs like, oh yeah, these investors are going to come in. It's
Right.
going to be. It's the Ralph $5 million, no problem, right? Okay.
Charlie, you said something to me one time that's always stuck with me, and it was, you know, build a business as though you're going to have to run it forever, and you won't have to. But if you build it thinking you're going to sell it, you're going to have to run it forever. You know, so we had a $30 billion West Coast VC, and they slow rolled the process on us. We were supposed to close in January, and then, you know, in February. And, you know, in retrospect, what I realized was they were watching the international market, and they saw this thing coming way before we did. they slow rolled the deal. We had a $25 million term sheet, and they just kept pushing close out for reasons that were seemingly inconsequential. And they called me on March, I guess whatever that Monday was, 16th, and I'd set a drop dead date for them to close on March 17th. And they called me on the 16th and said, yeah, we stopped doing deals, so we're going to pull the term sheet. But we'd love to come back to you in 30 to 60 days and renegotiate a price. And, interestingly, they had encouraged me to start hiring in advance of the funding. And
that's great. I love that.
I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to run really lean. But by you dragging out closing, I'm dropping my bookings number for the year because I'm depending on deploying your capital to increase bookings. So we were caught in this sort of thing. And, hey, if I would have been further over the tips of my skis, we'd have been in a lot of trouble. We'd have been laying off the people that we just hired. And, and then we would have been forced in a position of desperation, probably to go back to them and cut our valuation by, they were talking a quarter to a third based on public markets. And I just said, if this is the kind of partner that you're going to be, we don't need to talk again. Go ahead and delete the data room. So, it's a bit of a burn the ships sort of a thing, but we just, we walked away from them hard.
But I think that that's a real lesson that here they are, so this is investors. These are, like you said, they're Class A investors. This is a West Coast VC, and they're pulling back because one of the things is we're not sure about valuations anymore, right? So I'm thinking, I should get it for 50% on the dollar on what we were talking about 2 weeks ago. And of course, the entrepreneur is saying, no, it's still worth what it was worth. Right. So the distance between the bid and ask is so great, nothing happens. And that's what's kind of going on right now, I think, in these markets but Matt, that was really, really, really valuable. Thank you. Another person that I was talking to about this was a fellow named Matt Ethington. Matt, are you around? Unmute,
Good morning,
Matt.
Charlie.
Yeah, you are here. Good. Matt is the founder of Chronic Care IQ, a remote chronic care provider. His business is good. In fact, it's great. Matt raised $1.5 million in a couple of tranches over the last few years. And I've always admired Matt because he's very careful with his cash. And now his business is throwing off cash. And now he's sitting there like, okay, so how do I spend it to grow? So what are you faced with these days, Matt?
Yeah, well, I'm going to make a comment on the stories that I heard is, my budget growing up, it was always, my grandfather would tell me, if you don't need it, don't buy it. That's your budget. And so, and we're talking about
Where are you from, Matt?
Central Nebraska.
There you go.
Central Nebraska. My grandmother would write me letters on the inside of envelopes that she received from letters that she had received. So I grew up in a very frugal culture. So it's just, cash is king. So the position that we're in, and it makes me a little nervous. I mean, I guess I'm always a little nervous, is we provide remote patient, or we enable physicians to provide remote patient care with a turnkey award-winning platform that we've been building. And so we have seen our business, interest in our business, organic growth grow overnight almost. And we're a lean and mean team. We have 8 people. We've been streamlining implementations, and we've been trying to figure out how do we get to more people faster. And so the challenge now is, and I recognize that there's a lot of people on this call that are having the opposite experience. I want to be sensitive to that. I've been there. This is my 3rd company, and I've been in very dark days.
We wish you well, man. We want you to do well. We need well.
Sure. Well, so our business is poised for big growth. Now, the next thing that I have to prepare for is how do I grow along with that? So my little business isn't a proof of concept for someone with more money that's going to way overfund it and way outpace us. So it's a bit schizophrenic from that standpoint, from preserving cash. Now I got to understand how I spend it, where I spend it, because we won't be in these unique times forever.
Yeah, there you go. And so so it's interesting. So here you are with a business that seems to be taking off. You've got more cash basically than you've had ever, okay, in the business, generated by the business, okay? And I'm not talking about investors. And you're sitting here going like, okay, now I need to spend to grow. And what's your biggest concern in the spend to grow?
Where will I not be wasting it is my biggest, and by that I mean I have not figured out marketing. I've been in sales and building companies for years, and I just don't have that figured out. I really like to know every dollar that I spend, where it goes, and we know who the customers are. We know where they are, where the prospects are. Getting to them is difficult, and we really need a team that's going to be able to help us do that. So
this
people are everything.
Right? The hardest part of this thing is you get into a situation where you say, okay, I got the company to this point and I'm really, and with the things that I'm good at, which is sales, right? And this product vision that you had, which became, congratulations, an award-winning product. And now you're sitting here and saying, now I have to invest in things that I don't know. And that's kind of scary. Because
and I've made mistakes in that space. In December, we fired a vendor that we were spending $7,000 a month on, because over 6 months, I couldn't point to more than one acquired customer. And so, that I still think of that, like, wow, how did I spend almost, 50 grand on?
Well, can you give us like a short answer then on how do you manage, you heard Ralph, he had a whole thing about how he manages his cash. And you also heard from Matt Stevens, how do you manage your cash?
I sign all the checks.
So you're Ralph Boland, huh?
Yeah.
And, and in fact, you have the only signature authority. Is that it?
Yes. We're a small organization, so that the culture is pretty clean, right? People don't make commitments that they can't keep, and they know that we're frugal with cash. And I spend generously on people. People are paid well. We had a hat contest while everybody was working from home at our Monday mornings. The person that had the funniest or the best hat would win a $500 bonus. And I felt that was generous, but we gave everybody that $500 bonus because we're not seeing each other, wanted to keep everybody motivated. But I really need to understand the need for something before we make the specific happen. I can give you an example if you'd like.
No, well, a quick one if it'd be okay.
Yeah, the team came to me and said we needed a new software system for $2,000 a month, and they had been talking about it, and they were all excited that they were going to get it. And I looked into it, and I asked 3 questions that really couldn't be answered, and we canceled their big decision on the spot. And
what were the 3 questions?
And why do you need it?
Okay.
Can you do it somewhere else? And will this save $2,000 worth of time?
Okay. All right. So the return
within 15 days.
ROI.
Yeah.
So
Well,
when you
yeah.
spend $1, you want to make sure you're getting more money back.
I want 5. Yeah.
Woo! I love it. Okay. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for coming on. I know you're a busy guy, and I asked you to come on to just share because I knew you'd share some really cool stuff. But I like that. Can you get a 5x return on every dollar that you spend? That's a hell of a test. Anybody else here talking about, will share how they manage cash? How do you manage your cash? Not advice on how to manage, but how you manage your cash.
Charlie, I'd like to have a little bit of a sidestep on this, but people are our biggest expenses, period.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't mention, I should have mentioned, is that when you are looking through your people, no matter how capable they are, how important they are. If they're not positive and motivated and really into whatever the business is, you need to cut them. Negative people are cancer, and that's more than a waste of money when you keep somebody on who is not a team player and willing to do anything that they're asked to do and doesn't come up with things outside of their area that they're willing to do to help the team. And then when you get down to whatever that core number of people is, sound like Matt is there, then you have to keep them motivated. But it's not necessarily money motivation. It's all types of other types of motivations, like a silly hat contest. But those are the people that you keep when you have to go through the list of the hard decisions.
That's really good advice. And because in times like this, you do have people who are, and well, in any kind of, in times like this in particular, but I think in any kind of a startup, you always have the people that are believers, and you have the people that are doubters, and then you have the people who are not believers, but they stick around. And I think that you've got to make some decisions now on the doubters and the non-believers, and move on with a team of believers. That's really good advice, Ralph. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. We got just a couple minutes. I got time for one more person to share on how do you manage your cash. You willing to share with the rest of us?
All right, maybe Matthew Stevens suggested something on the chat Zoom for maybe the last 2 minutes.
Okay. What's that?
Matt?
Sorry, coming off mute. No, I was just responding to Charlie's question of how you manage. I meet with my CFO 3 times a week, just routinely now. We normally have a hour-long session, just the two of us, to review this stuff, but we increase the cadence to 3 times a week, and we're looking at our event horizon. We've got 60 days of cash, and that's the cash flow we're managing, and then we're kind of at sales projections for 60 to 120 days. And we meet 3 times a week to look at that and look at the sensitivity models. We've built, I think, 5 different business models based on the if this then that projections. But we're just 3 times a week to review cash flow and start to know when all of those 5 business cases, we just have more levers that will start to pull. And like I said, we pulled 2 of those levers already, which was thinning out a couple of underperformers and cutting discretionary spend. And we have more draconian levers that we can flip, but we've got to we watch it 3 times a week.
That's really, I love that, meeting with the CFO 3 times a week. That focus on cash is what it's, again, like I gave that quote, where your treasure is, so your heart will also be, from Christ, which is so true in our world. So what we're focused on is what we get. I once realized that, reading a book on how to make a lot of money. And I came to the conclusion is you make a lot of money because you think about money all the time and how you can make a lot of money. A lot of people wish they had a lot of money, but they don't think about money. So here we're talking about thinking about cash, and that's how you make sure that you always have cash.
Charlie, can I suggest another motivation for that?
Yes, sure.
Is, listen, I've got like 50 families that depend on my ability to manage cash right now. And it's not just me and my kids. We'll make it okay for a while. We've been blessed and, manage our personal finances pretty prudently and always have. But like I've got 50 families that depend on, our ability to run the business well through this thing. So it's not just about, accumulating wealth for me or anybody else. It's about trying to keep folks employed in a time of, real instability and uncertainty. And the more confidence we can instill in them about our ability to lead through it, and with full transparency. I mean, I tell them, listen, we haven't had to lay anybody off as a result of COVID yet. The 3 moves we made were related to performance, and we'd have taken those actions anyway. We just accelerated them. But I want to keep, to the extent that we can, keep people employed. And, if we have to cut salaries, if we have to cut headcount, we're going to do that. But we're doing everything that we can to avoid that.
I like that piece too, that, that's sort of the fear of God aspect here, that you have a greater stewardship responsibility beyond just yourself and, the investors and the value. You got to stay in the game. So in other words, build it like you're going to run it forever. And that's a great motivator to be looking out at your people on those Zoom calls these days and say, like, man, they're all depending on this thing working and we're in this together. I love that you're communicating with them on a regular basis too. Matt, thanks for jumping in and sharing such pearls of wisdom here. It's been very helpful. And also thanks to Richard Brock for taking the time to think about this, and Ralph Boland and all the sharing that you've done. And you, Yvonne, you always have some wise advice for us. So you made this all very, very valuable. Just to summarize, we need this whole idea of cash. You need it to stay alive. And Matt Ethington, I kind of let you off. I'm sorry. Thanks for sharing. But cash, we need cash. We need it to stay alive, and we need it to grow. And we all know you can't save your way to growth, but you can't grow unless you're alive. Okay. As a friend of mine says, this is a game where you must be present to win. Spend cash. The second thing is spend cash where you see it will bring more cash. I love what Matt Ethington said. I want a 5-to-1 return. So you got to be practical about that, and you got to stick to it. And then thirdly is put in tight spending controls, like Ralph said. This is something that will serve you well in bad times, but also in good times. Don't release those controls. They're really, really important. Money's hard. Cash is easy. You got to watch your cash. It goes out fast and comes in slow. So again, I always say we're going to get through this, and you're going to get through this. Next week, I think that we might talk about, I was talking to this lazy lady, Louise Wolasnowski, and she runs a startup. She said that she's staying on the front lines with her customers, which is helping her learn fast, decide fast, and actually go faster. So I think next week we'll talk about staying close to customers. And if you have an issue that you're facing, I ask for your help. Please send it to me, because if you're facing it and you're trying to decide what to do, other entrepreneurs are deciding the same, and we'll make it a topic of one of these. I ask you to come early. We start at 8:45 and we have a little chat, and you'll meet some new people, and we'll make some new friends. It'll be a lot of fun. So I'm here 15 minutes early each week. Know that I'm praying for you. I love each and every one of you, and I appreciate and admire you for what you're doing in these most difficult of times. So take care, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. We'll
Thanks,
see you.
bye.
Charlie, good stuff.